Hello again. In this screencast, we're going to be looking at Investigation 1 of the FOSS Earth History Kit. And this first investigation is really about introducing the students to the unit that you'll be studying over the next few weeks. It's an introductory lesson, and it's a way to warm up students to the skills of observation and inference, which they'll be using for the remainder of the unit. It's also a way for you to formatively assess how well students understand and can use these skills. The investigation is broken down to two parts, and students will be using a set of envelopes that you'll be giving them to record observations and inferences, which I'll be talking about in a moment. It shouldn't take more than about 2 days to run, and it's, again, like I said, fairly straightforward lesson. After a brief introduction about what they'll be studying in the coming weeks and about the field of geology, you'll be giving students a set of canceled envelopes that you provide, and I'll talk more about those envelopes in a little bit. Their task is to make and record observations about these envelopes by looking at everything from the return address to the sender address to the back of the envelope, any markings that they see, the stamp, and so on, and to also make up inferences about what might have been inside these envelopes, who sent them, how it was opened, and so on. As I mentioned, it's a fairly straightforward lesson. However, there are a few suggestions I do have for you before you teach the lesson. First of all, in my opinion, it helps if you have a sufficient number of envelopes for your students to work with. If you have a class size of about 25 and you're working in, say, groups of 2 or 4 students, then I would definitely recommend having, at a minimum, maybe 30 envelopes, 40 envelopes at your disposal, again, depending on your group size, because it helps just for the students to have a variety of envelopes and for them to be able to make different types of observations and inferences about these. That being said, it's important for you to start collecting your envelopes early. Would you be surprised how difficult that can be? Because if you're like me, a lot of your mail is junk mail, which may not be as useful as you would think. Don't be afraid to ask for donations from other people. It could be from other teachers in your building. It could be friends of yours. The one thing I'd point out, though, is you want to be clear that middle school students will be using these envelopes so that if there's any personal information on the envelopes that they would not feel comfortable sharing, they should probably not donate these for this purpose. It also works best if you have a variety of envelopes, everything from personal mailings to business and international mailings, and some junk mail is useful as well. It just gives students great opportunities to make a variety of observations and inferences about what they see. So again, the objective of this 2-day lesson is really just for you to be able to assess and reinforce the skills of observation and inference, as well as the importance of citing evidence when they do make an inference. If you do feel your students are already strong in this area, or you didn't have time to gather envelopes prior to teaching it, there are other opportunities out there for you to do observations versus inference activities. For example, this is something I borrowed from someone in the past. It's just a sketch or a drawing of something that happened. And as you can imagine, there are many ways you could ask students to make qualitative observations about what they see, quantitative observations, and also then to make inferences about what happened to cause this picture to look the way it does, or which fell first, the house or the power lines. Here's another example of a scene that students could be given. You could ask them to make observations, again, qualitative or quantitative or both, and then see if they can differentiate their observations from any inferences they would make, such as which driver was at fault. Was this an accident? Which driver was at fault? Did the truck on the left run the stop sign? Was anyone injured? And so on. So again, there are ways that you could do observations versus inference activities in case you don't have enough envelopes, or if you want to try to maybe shave off a day in the kit. I'd like to use the remaining time just to give you a little bit of a deeper look at the teacher guide and how it's set up. In the introduction video, I showed you an overview of the teacher guide as a whole and what's at the front part of the teacher guide. Now I'd like to show you a little deeper understanding of what's inside each investigation. I highly recommend it if you are new to the Earth History Kit or if you're new to FOSS in general, as the teacher guide has pretty much everything you need to plan and prepare for these lessons. So for example, here's the cover page for Investigation 1. and you can see that they give you the goal, the objectives. You could use some of this language when you're crafting your own content and language objectives for your classroom. Then it gives you a little matrix showing you what each part, okay, is part 1 and part 2 that I mentioned earlier. It gives you a synopsis, what the objectives are for that particular part, how you might assess the student learning, steps that you need to consider for preparing, and a step-by-step of how you would execute the lesson. This side of the page is really useful once you've been teaching the kit for a while. You won't find it of much use for your first year, but if you've been teaching it for a while, then you may only have to look at these to kind of jog your memory of what you would need to do next. Some scientific and historical background if you don't feel as comfortable with the content. Materials you would need for example, here's part 1, materials you would need for each group, materials you would need for the class. And then, I don't know if you can see it on your screen, but they'll put a little asterisk for any materials that you would need to provide for your class. A little snapshot of what the sheets look like, just to jog your memory again. There's always a getting ready section for what you need to do before you teach the lesson. And then conducting part 1 would tell you what you need to do step by step with a fairly good amount of detail to actually teach the lesson. There are little icons that say, for example, a question mark would be an assessment icon. 3 people saying next to each other as a discussion opportunity icon, and so on, just to kind of help you as you're going through this kit. And then each investigation ends with an extension opportunity or opportunities. Here, for example, they give an opportunity for students to see if they can determine, was the person who opened this envelope right-handed or left-handed, a way of going deeper into the inference activity. And then, since this is the beginning of the unit, there's an extension opportunity here for students to begin researching different careers in geology, which is something you might want to do for later on in the kit. So that's about it. As I mentioned, it's a fairly straightforward investigation, and good luck and have fun. Thank you.